Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into this video. For those of you that don't know, my name is Bintu, and on this channel I talk all about trends, where they're going, where they came from, and some influential figures along the way. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comment section down below what other videos you would like me to do. Alright, so today, as you guys can see, I am going to be talking about the bucket hat. Alright, so beginning in the 1900s, bucket hats were predominantly worn by English and Irish fishermen for protection against the rain, just because of their long brim. They were also extremely convenient because they could easily be folded and placed into an individual's pocket. And then fast forward a couple decades, bucket hats also began to be worn a lot by Vietnam soldiers, and at this time they were also referred to as boonie hats or giggle hats, and this is probably reflective of how it was used for functionality as opposed to fashion up until this point. In the 1960s, the bucket hat did make two big screen appearances. First, in Breakfast at Tiffany's, where main character Holly debuted a furry bucket hat played by Audrey Hepburn. This is clearly reminiscent of the current furry fuzzy bucket hat trend that we have going on in 2020 and into 2021. I will be touching on that later on in this video, so definitely stay tuned for that. And second, the bucket hat ended up becoming an iconic staple to the persona of Gilligan in the hit TV show Gilligan's Island, which premiered in 1964. During this period, we see a strong contrast in terms of how the bucket hat is conveyed. On one hand, Gilligan's portrayal of the accessory is more conducive to the original function of the bucket hat, and it definitely conveyed the uncool, goofy nature of the accessory at the time.
How are you?
But then on the other hand, we see Hepburn's character, Holly, debut the bucket hat in a very sophisticated and classy way. During the 1960s, when the bucket hat did become really popular in mod subculture, but then we also did see a lot of wealthy individuals of that time, like Hollywood actresses, wearing a furry bucket hat paired with furry coats. And to me, this is kind of reminiscent of early flex culture, because just the elaborateness of the outfits really conveyed a sense of status, I would say. However, it wasn't until the creation of hip hop that bucket hats ended up becoming a wardrobe staple. So in the early 1970s, an 18-year-old by the name of DJ Clive Coolhurt Campbell ended up creating what we know as hip hop today in the Bronx in New York City. By 1979, Big Bank Hank, a member of the legendary Sugar Hill Gang, ended up becoming the first rapper to debut the bucket hat, wearing a lavender bucket on stage while performing their hit Rapper's Delight. After this, the bucket hat trend really exploded in the hip hop community, really simultaneously with hip hop itself. Run DMC and the Beastie Boys were some of the first hip hop groups to incorporate hats in their everyday style, with Run DMC regularly rocking the fedora and the occasional bucket, while the Beastie Boys popularized the snapback. However, a black bucket became a significant part of Mike D's style. In my opinion, Def Jam artist LL Cool J, again from New York City, was really the one who wore bucket hats every chance he got, beginning in the mid-1980s.
My name is LL Cool J. That's two L's, a capital C, and a J.
So much so that the Kango bucket ended up becoming an integral part of his signature look. With regard to the bucket hat trend going into the 1990s, two significant things happened here. We started to see the blending of hip hop culture and basketball. Rappers wanted to be basketball players, and basketball players wanted to be rappers.
It may be so, but that's not all. They let Isaiah play like he's 10 feet tall.
Or the kind of moves that never fail. The weapon's the choice of Kevin McHale.
The same is true for Mark McGuire. When I wear weapons, I'm on fire. Well, what can the weapons do for King? Well, I can do just about anything.
You already know what you did for me.
What?
I walked away with the MVP.
NBA players like Michael Jordan and Dennis Rodman were seen wearing bucket hats, and this is also where we start to see the influence of sport and hip-hop in mainstream mass culture, really beginning in the late 80s and going into the early 90s. Once this subculture became mainstream, it started having a significant impact on youth culture as a whole. By the mid-1990s, bucket hats could be seen in popular TV shows and movies ranging from Clueless, Office Space, Full House, Sister Sister, and one of my personal favorites, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We also saw teen actresses like Raven-Symoné, Britney Spears, and Lindsay Lohan rocking the bucket from the late 1990s and into the early 2000s. And of course, we can't not mention fashion icon Aaliyah, who made the chill, laid-back vibe of the accessory super cool among young women. So continuing into the 2000s, this trend remained heavily engulfed in hip-hop fashion, consistently worn by rappers Missy Elliott, Nas, Cameron, and of course Jay-Z.
We in the studio right now, we working hard, we got the war paint on, we ain't gonna stop. It's the rock, holla.
Who remains loyal to the bucket to this day. And keep in mind as well that this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I did try to pay attention to the ones that wore the bucket hat on a regular basis. So between the mid-2000s and the early 2010s, it seemed like the bucket fell out of popularity. It was seen here and there within the hip-hop community, but it wasn't nearly as popular on a global scale as it once was. In 2005, Prada did try to make the bucket hat cool again, releasing a series of styles with elements similar to the mod subculture of the 60s. In 2012, Marc Jacobs attempted to do the same as well with their fall collection featuring the furry bucket hat. Around this time, however, bucket hats were making a comeback, but in the hip-hop space yet again. Alright, so I have three main examples I'm going to touch on here. So in 2011, California-based hip-hop group Odd Future launched their clothing line Gulfwing that still sells several bucket hat variations in colorful designs. Although the group wore snapbacks more than buckets, Earl Sweatshirt definitely had an impact on this trend, especially because their fan base was so diverse. Next, we have A$AP Ferg, who was part of the New York-based rap group A$AP Mob. A$AP Ferg wore bucket hats all the time.
I like wearing bucket hats. Like you see, I got the Kangol on right now, but I could always switch it up like this. I might have to switch it up. Sometimes you gotta throw that hat on and get low. I just love buckets. Bucket low like though.
Especially the jungle camo bucket, reminiscent of Cameron in the early 2000s. So again, we see this cycling back with the bucket hat. He even went on to sell bucket hats under his brand, even collaborating with the New York Knicks, creating this Mitchell & Ness bucket hat. Alright, so last but not even close to being least, we have Schoolboy Q. Now, I feel like Schoolboy Q was really the first rapper since LL Cool J that made the bucket hat an essential element of his wardrobe. Although it seems like he may have taken a break from the trend based on his 2016 interview.
Overrated. Try to see a skinny dudes with that loose ass bucket hat on their head looking crazy. It's mainly for fat people, okay?
But more recently, he was photographed in a bucket hat yet again on his GQ spread. While the influence of notable hip-hop figures I mentioned were by no means gender exclusive, I do think Rihanna played a major role in popularizing the bucket among young women specifically. So back in 2015, Melissa Ford, Rihanna's best friend, launched a bucket hat line, and unsurprisingly, Rihanna was often seen wearing her designs. A couple years later, spring 2018 proved to be the pivotal turning point, marking the beginning of the bucket hat comeback in high fashion. We saw brands like Chanel, which launched a rainproof design, while the Fenty and Puma collab came out with a purple bucket. Menswear collections have also started to include bucket hats too, such as the Valentino Spring/Summer 2019 drop. So Rihanna continued to have a substantial impact on the bucket hat trend throughout the late 2010s and into the 2020s. In 2020, she was spotted wearing a bright green furry bucket by designer Benny Andello, and again in 2021, she wore another one of his designs, this time an elaborate furry bucket paired with vintage Tom Ford jeans, and even more recently, she was spotted wearing a zebra pattern one. Alright. So the bucket hat also continued to make appearances on the runway with brands like Kate Spade, Bode, and Anna Sui coming out with their own designs in recent years. As for celebrities though, Rihanna isn't the only one to embrace the trend, with musicians Billie Eilish and Megan Thee Stallion often wearing the accessory, along with influencers Bella Hadid and Kylie Jenner. And even other celebrities including Hailey Bieber and Lori Harvey have both been recently channeling this look, indicating that it will likely continue to remain popular, especially going into the fall and winter seasons. However, like many of the current bucket trends we've seen, the furry variation isn't by any means new. JK, lead vocalist for the English band Jamiroquai, rocked an oversized fur top hat in the music video Virtual Insanity back in 1996. And even before that, like I mentioned before, the furry bucket hat was popular during the 1960s within mod subculture. Now, as far as other factors that likely played a role in the bucket hat's increased popularity, I gotta discuss the reemergence of Y2K fashion. This aesthetic seems to have revived the bright, pink, and playful bucket, with 2000s OG brands like Von Dutch continuously selling out of these styles, to emerging brands like Strawberry Milk Mob creating fun designs indicative of the era. Alright, so I also think it's worth discussing the influence of flex culture as well. So flex culture comes from the term flexing, which describes, and I quote, the act of showing off or fronting something new that you have purchased that is better than someone else's. Consequently, this culture has slowly but surely begun to gain popularity throughout Generation Z, with this style of culture being highlighted by the likes of popular rappers and YouTube influencers such as Jake Paul and Kanye. This can be anything from showing off a new car to just showing off the riches that you have in general. In my view, this may be a contributing factor when it comes to the popularity of the luxury and monogram bucket hat, which I've seen more and more in recent years, but I also think that specifically the monogram trend is probably also tied to the emergence of Y2K. But yeah, specific brands that stick out to me are Prada, Dior, Gucci, and Fendi. All these brands have an array of increasingly popular bucket hats that I've seen everywhere from Instagram to music videos. And worn by influencers, YouTubers, and rappers alike. As far as my thoughts go when it comes to the bucket hat moving forward, I definitely think that it'll increase in popularity, especially when it comes to the summer months, and it just seems to increase in popularity in June and July, the peak months of summer. And I also feel like this year, different from previous years, because the faux Sherpa style bucket hat like mine and the faux fur style bucket hat that we talked about before are super trendy right now, we could even see it maintain its popularity from the summer into the fall and the winter. So yeah, that wouldn't really surprise me if that happened. I also think that hats in a general sense will be extremely popular this year because they provide people with a casual accessory to just throw on, especially right now when a lot of people aren't getting their roots touched up and they're not getting their hair lined up nearly as often as before. And I also think that the bucket hat is just a fantastic fantastic way in general to really elevate your outfit. All right, so I also find this trend very interesting because unlike some of the previous videos I've done, the evolution of the bucket hat seems to be a lot more circular as opposed to linear. And what I mean by this is that instead of different variations being created as time goes on, like we saw with the scrunchie, we see most popular styles re-emerging pretty much exactly like they were before, time and time again. With that being said, I feel like in the next couple years, we might see the casual or sophisticated bucket hat, as I like to call it, come back, as well as the oversized top hat style, because as restrictions lift and people begin to spend more time outside, people will take every opportunity they can to dress to the nines. We saw this in post-World War I during the Roaring 20s, so I wouldn't be surprised if that happened again in the 2020s. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you guys when it comes to my analysis on the bucket hat. Like always, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. And with that being said, I am starting a new series, the It Bag series, which is going to be like a mini series I'm gonna do with about 8 different designer bags that had a significant pop cultural influence. And yeah, I'm gonna talk about each bag in each episode. So if you're not already subscribed, definitely do so you don't miss out. Well, I'll see you guys next week, okay? Have a great day. Bye.